Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's your flicker.
Hi, everyone. First, thank you very much all for being here. I'm very happy to see so many people. It's good. I've been waiting to see this community engagement around these fundamental questions. So thank you again for being here. I'm going to present you a talk that's probably a little bit out of the norm. So be ready. We are going to talk about the hidden roots of climate change. And I might just ask intuitively, if you were to think about the hidden roots, where would you look for them? Anybody has an answer? Where? People. Mm-hmm. Cultures. History. Well, we're going to look at all of that and more. So I'm really happy to hear those answers. Before we... okay. I'm just going to introduce myself shortly. Renato, by the way, just to check, how much time do I have?
We have about 50 minutes.
50 minutes. Maria, can you give me one sign when 20 minutes are engaged, another sign when 40 minutes are engaged, so I just know, just give me a little, thank you so much. A little bit of background about me. I'm coming from the corporate world. So I work for beautiful companies like Carrefour and then Classic Fine Foods, whatever. I was a senior manager and then expert consultant, and I really had everything that society calls success. Money, power, status. But something did not work for me. Is that the more I grew in that career, the more I realized I was part of a system that's bringing us on the verge of disaster. And I could see how our focus for growth and profits was very much related with the degrading situation, whether it's the ecological situation and the social situation. And so I became plagued with cognitive dissonance. And I had to deal with it. So I went to a meditative retreat trying to find inner peace. And I didn't find inner peace. But I found answers about how we could potentially solve our issues. And that led me to create New World Together in 2019. So something I've learned is that to resolve a problem decisively, we need to understand and address the root causes. And so for a long time, I've been kind of obsessed. What leads us to destroy our planet ecosystems and our future? And so New World Together was created to just do that, uncover and address the roots of unsustainability. And so what we use is a transdisciplinary approach, which means we break the silos between disciplines in order to extract a new knowledge that helps us to understand the problem and resolve it. And so in the talk I will present you today, you will find psychology, sociology, history, environmental sciences, completely mixed up, combined to give you a higher understanding of the problem and how we can solve it. During the first part of the presentation, we are going to look at the challenge that we are facing. On the second part, it's root causes. And the third part, we'll see how addressing the root causes can actually be an opportunity for the human species. Before we start, just to tell you the approach we're going to have. Imagine that we are an advanced alien species, and we are observing what's happening on Earth from an external lens. Like, okay, what is going on this planet, and why are the ecosystems of the planet getting unbalanced, right? And so we are looking at ourselves as if we were outside. We are going to think globally, in terms of humanity and planet, and we are going to go deep. My aim is to provide you key insights that will help you to make better choice so that you can be part of the solution. And in that presentation, maybe something will resonate with you, some others won't, take what resonates, leave the rest. You don't have to agree with everything. What's important is what resonates with you. Hopefully, if I do a good job, I will help you to remember what you already know deep inside yourself. So first, the problem. So the problem appears very much in the latest IPCC report when we talk about climate change. Climate change is increasing and will increase all over the globe. If we don't reduce consequently our greenhouse gas emission, we will largely overshoot our target of 1.5 degrees and even 2 degrees. And that means a lot of instability for our planet, ecosystems, and our climate. Right now, every fraction of degree makes a difference. We are really at a turning point. The problem is that at this moment, the situation doesn't appear to be dealt with seriously. For example, preparing this, I discovered that subsidies for fossil fuel have continued to increase and have exceeded $1 trillion in 2022. Greenhouse gas emissions have kept increasing despite all the pledges made to reduce them. So, as a species, we are currently failing on achieving our goals. And we're going to try to understand why and how we can learn from our mistakes to turn the challenge into an opportunity. But I would like first to start with this quote. It's a quote from Charles Pickering, because it will pretty much define the first part. A problem well stated is a problem I've solved. And right now, I would like to ask you a few questions. Is climate change a problem well stated? To you right now, what do you feel? And maybe to expand on that knowledge, is climate change the only ecological issue that we are facing? Is it the only global ecological issue we are facing? Waste management as well? Is there any other global ecological issue you're thinking of? Biodiversity loss. Have you heard of the overshoot of planetary limits? Is it something that you are familiar with? Planetary limits and overshoot, who already heard about it? Okay, about half, and probably those who maybe don't raise their hands already heard about it. But that's what I want to talk to you about. Because one of the key to understand the global ecological problem that we are facing is to think about planetary limits and humanity's ecological footprint. Let me explain that simply. Our planet has a capability to absorb the impact of our activities. It has the capability to generate resources. It has the capability to absorb pollution. It has the capability to regenerate the ecosystems of the planet. We call this capability the Earth's biocapacity. On the other side, we have our ecological footprint. There's the amount of resource that we extract. There's a quantity of pollution that we release. There's a certain amount of damage that we deal to our planetary ecosystems. We have a situation of overshoot when humanity's ecological footprint is higher than the biocapacity of the planet, which means we extract more than what the planet can stably regenerate, we pollute more than what it is capable of absorbing, and we destroy it faster than its ability to repair itself. And so a planetary overshoot has many consequences. One is resources overconsumption. So today it's estimated that the planet, to not overconsume the resources, the planet will need to be 1.7 times bigger than what it is right now. So it isn't, which means we take more than what the planet can sustainably produce. This has consequences on the ecosystems. They get destroyed. So reports said about 70% of the ecosystem of the planet are either damaged or destroyed. Of course, when we destroy the ecosystem of the planet, we destroy also wildlife. I'm sorry for the statistics, they're a bit depressing, by the way. But it's 60% of wildlife that's been destroyed in less than 50 years. There's also pollution of air, of soil, of water. The estimated amount of people who die of air pollution, premature death, is about 9 million per year. And then there is climate change. So climate change is far to be the only problem we are dealing with. And today, one of the things that I notice is it seems that we are at war with climate change, but we don't realize that climate change is a symptom. It's almost as if you have the really bad illness and you also have fever, but we are trying to address the fever without truly diagnosing the illness. Just to tap into your intuition, we talked about planetary overshoot as the major factor of ecological crisis that we face. What do you think generates this planetary overshoot? What are some of the factors that are key? Can you think of something? Sorry? Overconsumption, yes. And what generates overconsumption?
The way we're educated.
The way we're educated, so education system, pretty good one. Population growth. Capitalism, and probably consumerism. Yes, all of that are factors, right? And just to ask you, because here we are talking about sustainability, right? Basically, our ability to live today without sacrificing the future of our children. And when we think about sustainability, we generally think about ecology, right? The first thing pops to our mind is, oh, how do we take care of our planet? But let me ask you now, is sustainability only about ecology? Or could there be other factors?
Human behavior.
Sorry?
Human behavior.
Human behavior, yes, of course. Yeah. So let me tell you a story. You know about the Roman Empire, right? It collapsed. It's one of the many empires that collapsed. Ecology was almost not part of the issue. It collapsed because of geopolitical factors, because of cultural factors, because of political factors. So basically, politicians were more concerned about their power than about the people. The culture started to become decadent. People did not really care anymore. There was community conflicts. And so all of this led to a collapse of the Roman Empire. Ecology was not a major factor. So that's just to say that when we think about sustainability, it's not just about ecology. There are socio-economic factors. Let me give you some of them. For example, yes, the fact that the world population has increased, multiplied by more than 3 in less than 60 years. We are now more than 8 billion. So of course, this means we have more impact. But it's also growing inequalities. Today, a very small minority of the world population capture the vast majority of the wealth, and these inequalities are increasing. Can a society be sustainable if inequalities are constantly increasing? I don't think so. It will lead to social tensions, as we can see in my country right now. There are economic factors. Today, notably, we have a financial system based on debt, and the debt has constantly increased over the last decades. We are now at more than 300 trillions of global debt. And this means we constantly need to grow the economy in order to keep the financial system running. There are political factors. When politics become about short-termism and becomes really influenced by powerful financial lobbies, then it stops working for the people. There are cultural factors, I heard about it. The culture of materialism, of individualism, of consumerism, that is becoming the global culture today. There are geopolitical factors, when our nations are competing with one another for their military, economic, cultural interest, instead of collaborating to resolve the global situation that we are facing. There are psychological factors. We are now talking about a global mental health crisis. More people facing situations of depression, of anxiety, and there are technological factors with the multiplication of technologies that can endanger our future because they are used not to regenerate our planet, but to become more competitive and powerful. So I'm thinking about AI, weapons of mass destruction, surveillance systems, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to say here is that when we think about sustainability, it's very important to think in terms of systems, because all these issues are not separated from each other. They are interrelated with one another. So my question to you is, can we be effective in addressing climate change if we don't understand how it is interrelated with all the other factors of unsustainability? What do you think? Anybody want to give an answer? There's no just what you think. Huh? I think it's very hard. And I think one of the reasons why we have failed is that we have not addressed these issues thinking in terms of systems. We have thought per silo. And by doing so, we have missed the fundamental cause of the problem. If we look at the ecological factor of unsustainability, the social factors, etc., which are all interrelated together, what do they share in common? What is the common denominator that brings them together? It's us, right? And particularly, what about us? Because what about us makes us create these issues?
Anthropocentrism.
Anthropocentrism. I could say it's our behavior patterns. Would you agree with that? Is how we relate to the natural environment, but also how we relate to one another and to ourselves. And so that's the first one. Properly defining the problem is understanding what we are facing is not just climate change. It's a systemic global challenge of sustainability, which has plenty of factors that are interrelated and that all stem from certain human behaviors. I'm going to skip this question because you already gave some answers. Now we are starting in part 2. This is where it starts to get juicy, dense, and a bit more disturbing. We are going to dive into what are these behaviors that create the situation in which we are and what generate them. First thing I would like to ask, do you know what percentage of our choices and action are the result of conscious mechanism or conscious choices? What is the part of the unconscious and the conscious within the way we live our lives? Who has an idea of what science says about that? 20%? 10? 5? Any more? Auctions on 5? All right, yes. So basically the consensus said that about 5% of our choices in action are the result of conscious choices. 95% are purely unconscious mechanisms. So what do you think? Is the global sustainability challenge that we face a conscious choice? We are like collectively saying, yeah, let's do this. Climate change sounds like a good idea and destroying our future. It's a plan, or it's the result of unconscious choices. We are making choices unaware of their consequences. What do you think? What's your bet? Yeah, the second one. I don't think we are consciously suicidal as a species. I don't think we are consciously choosing to destroy the future of our children and the next generations.
I think that's too easy.
Okay.
As an excuse, you always have a choice. You make a conscious choice, I buy this or I buy this. It's a very
Sure,
conscious choice.
but you can only make choices out of your level of awareness. Right? So we're going to dive into this. We're going to dive into this. So if you can be patient. Can you? Okay. So one thing I heard history before, so it's really good. So one thing we know about human behaviors, and is that they stem from our past. So there's this ABC system, basically, which is really good to change behavior. It says that basically all our habits, all our behavior habits, they stem from what happened in the past, and they have consequences. And basically that says if you want to change your behavior, it's really good to understand what they are, what the consequences are, and where they come from. And so generally this is used at the individual level, but we use it at the collective level. So what we say is that the way we function as a species stem out of our past history and is creating this meta-crisis of sustainability. Guess what we are going to explore next? Our history. And so if you look at our history as a species, first, we are very new on this planet. So if the planet was 24 hours, we would just have arrived a few seconds ago. We are very new. And most of our existence, we spent it here. This is the Stone Age. About 10,000 years ago, so about 150 to 200,000 years in the Stone Age as a result of our evolution. And then over the last 10,000 years, we moved to the Bronze Age, then there was the Iron Age, and finally something that we are calling the Anthropocene. Who already heard about the Anthropocene? Yes? Very important word if you want to understand why we are in the situation in which we are today. So our ancestors, or most of our existence as sapiens, we spent it in primal survival, in the wild. And are we very physically developed as sapiens compared to other mammals? Not really, right? But we make a difference because of our ability to think, to create tools, to create cultures, to develop habits so that we can survive. And one of the very key factors of survival is fear. It means that in the wild, those who have the capability to identify real dangers are those who optimize their survival. And if you think of it, what kind of danger have we faced all over the globe, no matter where we come from? Ice ages, so we'll say like extreme climate situation. Okay, what else? So potentially also, what would that create? Also, aside from being cold, like what kind of danger did that generate? Potentially difficulties to find resources, would you say? Yeah? Yeah? What else? Yeah. So the need for resources, 100%, potentially scarcity. What else can you think of? Imagine living in the wild. What would you be afraid of? Predators, right? And predators could be like in terms of animal predators or potentially also rivals. Right. What else? Do you have any other diseases? Yeah, so it's kind of a still hostile environment, right? With threats that can be visible or invisible. Yeah. Basically, we identified three main types of danger that were faced all over the globe. The first one is the danger of hostility. Predator, rival, illnesses, extreme natural events. The second one is the danger of scarcity, not having enough of what we need to survive. And the third one is the danger of separation. To be separated from the group. We, as a species, we thrive when we are together. We are very vulnerable when we are isolated. Just imagine that. Imagine that we were to remove everything except what we have extracted and built from our own hands. What will we be left with right now? I think we'll be mostly all naked in the wild, right? So we depend on each other to survive. And especially in the past, being rejected by the group will often mean persecution, potentially death. And so to survive, we learn that we need to dominate and control this hostile environment. We need to be strong. We also learn that we need to accumulate resources because there might not be enough in the future. And then we learn that we have to conform to social norms. We have to seek for external validation. And this created, when we strive to dominate and control, this creates rivalries for power between each other. When we strive to accumulate always more resources, that creates a competition for resources. And when we are all seeking for validation, then we also start to compete for status. And really what happens is that those who are the best at this rivalrous survival game take the lead. And so this takes place between different human tribes, but also between individuals. And are we still doing this today? Yes, right? So it seems that some cultures had a different way of dealing with the situation. Some cultures learned to evolve in harmony with nature. But what happened is that they met cultures who were thriving by dominating nature. And what happened is generally they were not able to resist. So what we see is there was a colonization of the world by the tribes that were the most dedicated to dominate, to accumulate, and to conform. So these were mainly Western Europeans. So this is not to blame anyone. But basically, to give you a statistics, beginning of the 20th century, 84% of the surface of the globe was colonized by Western Europe. So 2 continents were taken, Australia and America. And so basically, those who colonize also place their values and the way they function. And so colonization and these impulses of domination, of accumulation and conformism basically led the way to what we call the Anthropocene. A very important period to understand because before the Anthropocene, we humans were part of the natural environment. After the Anthropocene, we not only have the power to dominate these natural environments, but we can transform them on a large scale. And so the Anthropocene is a new paradigm. We basically go from being part of nature to dominating and transforming nature. It's basically the Industrial Revolution that led to this time. And it was followed by what we call the Great Acceleration. We already heard about the Great Acceleration. So the Great Acceleration started about the 50s, and what it explains is that it's an exponential increase of the world population, of technological progress, and of the impact that we have on our ecosystems. And so the overshoot of our planetary limits was first recorded about 20 years after the beginning of the Great Acceleration. And just to see how it looks like, if I look at the Stone Age, which is where we spend most of our existence if we think about the human species, this is 100,000 years of evolution. We basically built a hut and started to become sedentary, right? Started to develop early forms of agriculture. Then we moved to the Bronze Age and Iron Age, 1,000 years of evolution. We've sharpened our weapons. We got better armors and things like this. That's 1,000 years of evolution. Now we're going to go to the Anthropocene and the Great Acceleration. 100 years of evolution. 1900, 2000. So you can see there's far more technological progress in 100 years in the Anthropocene and Great Acceleration than in 100,000 years in the Stone Age. And now, today, 20 years of evolution. We are in the middle of the Great Acceleration. I use the phone. So that's what our ancestors were communicating with back in the days. I also had to try those. It was cute. So now, that was like, 20 years ago, something like that. And now we have the digital revolution, which basically, I don't know if you noticed, but it changed everything. In the way we think, in the way we relate, in the way we communicate. Right. So this is 20 years. So this is unprecedented. We've never seen that, never, in human history. And so basically, that's the curve of human population. That's the curve of biodiversity loss. And that's the curve of climate change. Should we be surprised that we are facing a planetary overshoot? Question. Is this surprising? Attends, wait, I need to check the timing. 10 minutes left? 10 minutes left? For this one, right? Or for the entire talk? For the entire talk. Okay, that comes as a surprise. We are just halfway. Okay. All right. Bon, we're gonna skip this.
We are selling time.
Okay, tell me your price for okay.
No worries.
All right. So I'm gonna speed this up. So basically, short notice, it's not surprising. If we are all in competition for more, and we don't pay attention to the limits, and we are increasing our population, of course we're going to overshoot our planetary limits. Duh. So it's normal, right? It's the logical result of the way we function. And so what's to understand is that we've built our society on these primal survival impulses. If you think about the impulse of domination, which is generating all this rivalry for power, well, we have nations for this, with armed forces which are ready to die for their flag. So if we think of the need to accumulate always more and the competition for resources, well, we've built our economic system on that. This is capitalism in its current form, competition for more. And if we think about the need to be accepted by the group and to seek for external validation, so we have plenty of social norms that tell us what it is politically correct and what is not, and how we should behave and how we should think, etc. The problem is that these survival impulses are not very fit for purpose in the context of exponential technological progress. Let me show you. When we are all competing for the domination and control, and then, of course, that create power struggles, and notably in terms of nation arms race, and then we had exponential technological progress, what we are developing is weapons of mass destruction, which leads to an existential risk for catastrophic war. If we have an all-out war, like our ancestors used to do right now, with all the destructive power that we have, we destroy ourselves. It's what Einstein said. I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. When we are all competing for more possession and resources, and we had all these extracting capabilities, then logically what we create is an overshoot of our planetary limits and a risk of systemic collapse. And then finally, when we reject ourselves to conform to the norm, and we had exponential tech, we have this surveillance system and this mass engineering, which can lead to a robotization of the human species. And so what we have is a primal survival instinct that is not fit for purpose in our times. And so if I think about the root causes, we are getting there. What's happening is we have all these symptoms of unsustainability. They are all driven the result of primal survival patterns deep-rooted in fears that come from our past history. And you will see that these primal survival mechanisms perpetuate themselves. So we have the ancestral threat and fear of hostility. That leads to the impulse to dominate and control. Then we have create these rivalry dynamics and these power struggles. And then we have aggression, conflicts, arms race, etc. And that will perpetuate the ancestral fear and threat of hostility. And when we had exponential tech, then we have a risk for catastrophic war. Same type of vicious cycle happen with scarcity. We want to accumulate always more, we compete to hoard, then we have inequalities on one side, overshoot on the other, and a risk of collapse. And finally, for the threat of separation, we conform to social norms, we reject our authenticity inside and outside, we create tribe which reject difference, and we perpetuate a paradigm which can lead to our obsolescence, because when it comes to conforming, robots are far better than we are. How can we break these vicious cycles? Any idea? How we're going to get there? If we still have time, otherwise, too bad. We're going to make it. Yeah. How do we break this vicious? Any idea? How do we break this? How can we address that? Because we are collectively into this paradigm of hostility, of scarcity, of separation, which obviously we are self-perpetuating with our primal impulses of survival. How do we break that? It's okay. So, first, the key is to neutralize the threat. As long as we have to fear this danger, we will naturally have the impulses. And so to neutralize the threat of hostility, we need to learn how to solve our conflicts peacefully. So me, back in the days, the game was win the conflict. Beat your opponent, be the strongest. Now I'm like, okay, no, it's not the game anymore. Now I need to learn how to find a common ground with the people I can have conflict with. That means I need to develop my sensitivity, I need to learn to respect people's consent, I need to develop my vulnerability, completely new sets of human qualities that I didn't learn, because it was all about being strong and competitive. And if we can do that, then indeed we can learn to understand each other and to resolve the conflicts and starting neutralizing the threat of hostility. This, if we can do that collectively, and I don't say this is a win, we have to learn, but that can lead to world peace. And the same thing happened with all these other vicious cycles. To neutralize the threat of scarcity, we need to learn to share resources instead of competing to have always more. Basically, that means fulfilling our real needs rather than compulsively striving for more. And if we can do that, our real needs include integrating our planetary limits and our social limits. We can decrease inequalities and have sustainability, and that's the path to symbiosis with our natural ecosystem. And then for the threat of separation, I need to be validated by others, is about reconnecting to myself. Who am I behind the mask that I am wearing to people-pleasing? And learning to accept and integrate my difference and the one of others, so that we can unite in authenticity. I'm not saying it's easy. Question, what are the psychological consequences of us living in a paradigm where we don't feel safe, where there is hostility, where there is scarcity, where there is separation? Any idea? Living in fear, yeah, for sure. What else?
Stress and anxiety.
Yeah, stress and anxiety. Basically, it's very traumatizing. It has an impact. It creates psychological wounds. So trauma is a psychological wound. And if we look at our history, what we see is that our ancestors, they have been through plenty of very traumatic experiences. World war, colonization, famines, extreme poverty, etc., etc. And what these experiences generate is what we call intergenerational and collective traumas. We already heard about this word. So a collective trauma is a trauma that impacts a large group at the same time. And these leave deep wounds in the collective unconscious. Who is a bit trauma aware here? Who has already done a bit of? This is, hopefully after this talk, you will understand why the resolution of trauma and the sustainable transition are very interrelated. And so therefore, why trauma awareness is key to understand ourselves and the situation in which we are. Traumas, when they are not resolved, first thing that they create is we become disconnected from our true self. It's almost like we integrated that we cannot be ourselves, that we gotta be worried. We have integrated that within our bodies. And unless the trauma is resolved, we live in a state of existential anxiety, of stress. And that stress is what leads to all these compulsive behaviors, these addictions. It can be addictions to drugs, to alcohol, but also to power, to money, to sex. And belief systems. So we're going to go there. And so basically what we see here is that the path that we've been through has led to a lot of wounds that we compensate with strong ego identities, full of compulsive patterns that create the chaos in which we find ourselves. And of course, that creates a vicious cycle that looks like this, right? There's conflict and suffering, traumatizing experiences, wounded inner self, ego identity, compulsive pattern, and ruthless rivalries. And we are feeding the cycle very unconsciously because we didn't know until now. So this is where the unconscious takes a place. If we don't know we are doing it and why we are doing it, then it's unconscious. And there's also an interrelation with our belief, but I will skip this because we're running out of time. And so basically these three cycles that we were talking about, they are also cycles of trauma, fear, and belief. So just something very important to understand. If I have an ego that is deep-rooted in a trauma that I have not acknowledged, generally I will have a belief to hide it, to not acknowledge that actually I'm also wounded. And so traumas are really false and limiting belief generators. So not only we live in anxiety, but we also have false belief to rationalize all of that, such as, this is human nature. So with the experienced threat of hostility, scarcity, and separation, there's also a lot of trauma, fear, and belief of hostility that are feeding on the impulses that we've seen, right? So trauma, fear, belief of hostility, of scarcity, and separation. And all of this is feeding the impulse. And by the way, those are interrelated. We can't take one of the circles separated from the other. It's all interrelated. And so if we look at the root causes, now that we have a bigger picture, what we see is that we have all these symptoms, climate change, ecosystem destruction, biodiversity loss, etc., all generated by unviable collective patterns, on top of which we have obsolete social structures. Oh yeah, I forgot to say. Because on our beliefs, we create our culture and our societies. So when we have collective traumas hidden by collective beliefs, we also have social structures based on top of it, societies that have the tendency to feed on these traumas. To give you an example, the trauma of scarcity, the fear of not having enough, what do you think capitalism is feeding on and consumerism is feeding on? On the fear of not having enough. And therefore on the trauma underneath it. And so these stand on limiting collective belief, the belief that this is the only way that we can function as a species, which is hiding a collective traumatic stress, deep-rooted in unresolved collective traumas that stem from the grim history of humanity. Actually, there's plenty of stuff from our history that we don't acknowledge because we're so ashamed of it. And so this is part of what we brush under the carpet, thinking that brushing it under the carpet will make it disappear. It needs to be addressed and healed. And so basically my question is like, if we focus here, so we're going to have people like focusing on climate change on the left and then people focusing on biodiversity loss on the right and all trying to fix these problems, are we going to be effective? What do you feel?
Addressing the symptom,
Yeah, it's addressing the symptoms. Like it's like being at war with a running nose instead of understanding that there's an epidemic of flu. Right. If we work on the social structures and the collective patterns, are we going to be more effective? Probably yes. But what you're going to face is this. So I have the perfect example. When I hear people speaking about degrowth, and then there is all others, no, it's impossible, it's crazy, etc. What are they actually tapping into in the collective unconscious? Those limiting beliefs and those fears and those traumas, right? So where for me we have a high leverage is if we start to do individually and collectively the inner work here. Doesn't mean we stop working on this. It means we also integrate that we need to work on that and we do it. Question, if I am not tripping out right now, and this is true, why haven't we noticed until now? Any idea?
Has to be a collective human thing. Linearly. So
We think linearly, yeah, for sure.
yeah, it has to be collective. So it has to be.
Yeah, so we didn't notice because everybody was kind of impacted at the same time. So we just said that's normal. It's like a fish who has always been in the polluted water and doesn't even know it's a clean water, right?
You probably notice it's just the alternative is hard.
The alternative is hard. Maybe we don't know how to do it yet, right? Yeah. So basically, first of all, like acknowledging our past traumas is very vulnerable. Hello. And so we don't like vulnerability in our society. We like to be strong, so it's kind of something we push under the carpet. Second thing is, if we speak about climate change and even more, if we speak about the systemic challenge of sustainability, we talk about what we call an hyper-object. Let's keep this. Have you already heard about an hyper-object? So an hyper-object is an element of reality that is so big that we cannot control the outcome, and on top of that is challenging all our beliefs. So generally when we face that, we are very well designed psychologically. Our ego said, I don't want this. Distraction, right? So it will take a lot more emotional and mental maturity for all of us to be able to acknowledge the situation in which we find ourselves so that we can react coherently. There's also the fact that we are not wired for this because this is the first time we have a planetary overshoot. So we cannot really depend on our lesson of the past, what we already know. And finally, there's the fact that this is very subversive. And those who are winning at the current status quo don't want it to change. Very naturally. I'm not throwing a stone here or blaming. I will do the same. Right. And so basically what's happening is we have this kind of vicious cycle. We have a global sustainability crisis. It's an overwhelming hyper-object. So we go into denial and escapism, and we'll say you, me. I say collectively. then we become disconnected from reality and from ourselves. What do we truly feel about that? Are we really okay with that? Are we truly okay with that if we face it? And then this feeds false belief, ignorance, apathy, carelessness, which leads to poor decision making, and the poor decision making is just feeding the crisis. So to break this, we have to develop our emotional and mental maturity to accept what is happening. Okay, it's normal. If we look at what I just told you, what is happening is absolutely logical and normal. There's nothing abnormal. What's not normal is not to deal with it. So that we can reconnect to ourselves and to reality, so that we can develop our self-awareness, our sense-making and foresight. And by the way, I'm saying this because there's a big mental and emotional aspect to it. Dealing with this is emotionally and mentally transforming. And the process is not the most pleasant. But so that we can make proper decisions, so that we can solve our problems. And then once we solve our problem, everything will be more easy to digest. But the key is to move from ear to ear. Anyway, summary of part 2, and I'm going to go very fast on part 1, on part 3. But I know it's like Albert Einstein. He said, if I have 1 hour to fix the problem, I spend the first 55 minutes on the problem and the last 5 on the solution. So we do something like that. But basically, so we are still driven by a primal survival instinct that has become obsolete and unsustainable in the Anthropocene. It's deep-rooted in belief, fears, and traumas from bygone past. And we need higher level of mental and emotional maturity in order to face the situation and resolve it collectively. But we are all working on it here. So this is all part of the solution, I want to say. So, part 3, how do we fix this? How do we heal ourselves and make a way toward a desirable, sustainable future? I'm going to skip this. The key here, you remember, is we're going to have to work on our traumas. So basically what I'm saying here is that breaking these vicious cycles imply inner work. Who is doing inner work already here? Right. So I truly invite you, this is something to consider if you don't yet. There's many ways to do it in Bali. Good news, you're in the right place. And so basically what we want, we're going to have to recognize where we come from and the green past of our ancestors. And for example, for us Western people is recognizing our the colonial past and the traumas that have been inflicted on the tribes that have been colonized. And how it is still being perpetuated until today, by the way, very often without us being aware. Just an example, not say it's the only one. And as a Western in Indonesia, I particularly kind of slap myself on the side of the face to remind as well that this is important. This is not about blaming or judging, this is about healing our past collective traumas so that we can release those fears and distress and dissolve those limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves and one another that are standing in our way to actually change the society in which we live and to evolve toward more regenerative behavior patterns so that we can fix all these issues. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm saying that this is fundamental to the solution. I'm not here telling you like, oh, this is going to be a process and we are all in this together. So there's a bunch of old beliefs that are a bit outdated. I'm not going to give you all of them, but for example, one of the beliefs that perpetuate the paradigm of hostility is the idea that man is a wolf to man, and that life is about survival of the fittest, and that we got to fight each other to survive. I think this, we know already that actually humans are social and empathic beings. We are not that evil, and therefore we can learn to resolve our conflict if we learn to break the trauma cycles. Let's skip this one. How to get there in 7 steps. The first one is your awareness. Be aware of what is taking place is key, because without awareness, you cannot take proper decisions in your daily life, in your professional life. Is awareness enough? No. What else is needed? Taking action, right? Basically, what I call this is the integration, right? I can be aware that I should stop smoking, but if I'm still smoking 2 packs a day and this awareness is not translating into my action, I won't integrate it. So the integration process is a process of healing, of unlearning, but basically so that we can be able to embody the sustainable change that we want to see. And then if I'm able to do it by myself, is this enough? I can be Superman with my cap and, fix climate change and everything? No, right? What do we need to do? We need to come together, right? We need to, this is teamwork. We're literally moving from a competitive game to a collaborative game to fix this. And so we have to find ways to come together as we are doing today. And what are we trying to achieve here? What do we want? What do we need to do for the change to happen on a bigger scale? Yeah, well, in a sense, we need to popularize this, right? It cannot be something on the side in the underground culture. This needs to become mainstream. This new way of thinking, of relating, and this process in which we are together, so that we can proceed with systemic changes. Because it's nice to be willing to collaborate, but when the system is based on competition, it's really complicated, right? So ultimately, we need systems that support us so that we can go through a planetary regeneration. And this is a process that to me has a chance to work. By the way, planetary regeneration means on the surface of the globe, we repair the ecosystems we have damaged and we heal on a global scale, right? And of course, there are positive feedback loops. Here we are in the individual evolution toward the collective transformation or collective evolution. And this in turn will support the individual evolution. It's an entire process. And even if we are in step 6, we are also still becoming more aware and integrating new stuff. So it doesn't stop. So here we are still at an early stage, but we have a plan. And what I love with this is that it's almost like an evolution. Until now we've been sapiens, we thought, but without knowing why we thought the way we think, not really knowing ourselves. The idea is to become self-aware human, who understand why they think the way they think, and who understand their creative power. So basically what I see is that this crisis that we face is a great opportunity for evolution for all of us that start here, within us, in the here and now. So that's beautiful. And so it's the hero's journeys of humanity. And I know we're running out of time. Yes. Feel like So basically, my invitation is for you to keep going on that journey. The intention is the first place. Yes, I want to be part of the solution. Then you have to make choices and take action. These action and choices, they will lead to challenges. Trust me, that won't be an easy ride. But from these challenges, you can grow and you can evolve and refine your intention. And this is a process in which we're invited to go individually and collectively. It's the process of conscious evolution. Who do I want to become? What is my role in this situation? And there's many things that we can do to participate in this process. So to summarize everything that I said, we are facing a global systemic crisis of sustainability. It's deep-rooted in a primal survival instinct that has become unfit for purpose. To solve this, we need to heal and consciously evolve. And this crisis is an opportunity to become conscious of ourselves, of one another, and of our interrelation, and so much more. So the big question now is, how do we scale this level of understanding and awareness so that it becomes mainstream and we all understand that we are on the same boat and that we have a lot to heal and a lot to learn from one another? Thank you very much, and sorry for the extra time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks. I really, really appreciate it. Amazing talk. Would anyone have any questions? Feel free to ask. Yeah, sorry.
So thank you. I really appreciate the way you've positioned it as a systems thinking, the way you've shown that it's not a linear process, the way especially that you highlighted that it's symptoms, not an illness, and that really trying to solve climate change is probably asking the wrong question. I'm going to challenge a historical point, but not in an oppositional way, in a way that I think probably supports what you're saying. And it's this question of scarcity. It's this question of hostility. It's the question that it is a human primal instinct. Historically speaking, we're talking about 10,000 years since the agricultural revolution. Before the agricultural revolution, there was no issue of scarcity. People ate over the long term. Maybe 1 year, 2 years they had issues, but over the long term they ate because scarcity is a function of population. When population is stable, there is no issue of scarcity. We don't worry about whether deer or penguins have enough food when humans aren't involved, because the natural system works itself out, and humans, part of that natural system, work it. And that system worked for pretty much 2-3 million years before Homo sapiens. Again, just because they were destroyed doesn't mean it didn't work. The rainforest works, it's just destroyed by other factors. I just wonder whether we can think about what we can learn from those societies before the agricultural revolution, before the hoarding of resources. And I wonder, and this is the part where it's actually going and saying that this isn't a human story, it's the story of what happened after the agricultural revolution. It's the story of the culture that came out from Europe and Asia when they started to have monocultures. And monocultures, I mean just a patch of land, just for one culture. Could we go back and look at what those societies before the agricultural revolution did to thrive, and what are some of the lessons that we learned, that we could learn? Maybe supporting one another, the system supporting us, helping our natural environment, ourselves thrive, and having that environment help us thrive. I wonder if that's a story we can tell, rather than saying that it is a human condition.
Yes, absolutely. I don't believe it's a human condition. At least I don't believe we are talking about something unchangeable. I agree with you, and I think in part at least. And I think this is why today indigenous culture are coming back into the spotlight, because realize that they know things that we forgot, and these things they know is exactly what is critical for us to be able to achieve the sustainable transition. And so, yes, definitely there is a lot to learn from those who have learned to thrive in harmony with the ecosystem of the planet and of their connection to nature. One of the things also that is a characteristic of the Anthropocene is a disconnection from nature. We don't realize that we are part of nature, that our life depends on the ecosystems. There's almost this crazy ego trip to completely disconnect from nature, to become immortal and things like this through technology. And so we forgot that base that we are nature. We're not separate from it. And indigenous culture understand that very well. So yes, very good point. Thank you. Thank you, Benjamin. Anybody else?
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you so much. It was very insightful. Really hits in there. I think we had a bit of a awareness on the step one. The rest of the process still need to work on. I think it's rather a question. I was thinking, being funny, but would more things like COVID would actually change a bit of our behavior as well. I think during the COVID period, all the ecosystem is coming back, and soon it stopped. Boom, everything back to normal. Of course, it's not. It's just the lifestyle of the COVID, but not the actual disease which kill people. But maybe we use that as a case study to we can be productive during the COVID.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, COVID showed us that if we want, we can change. If we truly want, we can. And it was made very easily, right? And so probably there was not the best condition to change because it was very oppressing. But I think if we really go to what is essential, what is beautiful is that we actually can untap a lot of energy and power for things that are beautiful, that really fulfill us inside, for community connection, for game, for play. Most of what we are doing right now only makes sense within the current economic system. It's just feeding indicators that themselves don't make sense anymore, just a GDP. And so there's so much more than we can do if we break free from these limiting beliefs and the system that we've built on top of that. And so I totally agree. And I think we had a glimpse of the change that we are capable of doing during COVID. And we also, for many, had a glimpse that what we are doing is, what are we doing actually? For a lot of people, pressing the pause button was like, wait a minute, what is my life about, right? And I think COVID is really a catalyst of the change that we want. But certainly there is much more that we need to accomplish together.
Yes, it's done.
Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you so much, Ben. Really appreciate it. So this is the first talk of Scale Climate Action. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And there's a reason why this is the first talk, right? Because when we talk about climate change, we are talking a lot about the solutions to, or the science behind climate change and what we need to do. But there's very little talk about what's really the root of it and how we need to change the way that we behave in the world in order for us to address the root causes. So I think it's a very, very important talk. Thank you, Ben, once again for giving us your time, and really, really appreciate it.